Are you ready to update that 30 series GPU? Maybe hold off a minute. For those of you following along, you may see a very similar video also in my channel. This is attempt number 2 because when I put a lot of time and effort into the initial video, I've been purchasing new equipment and trying to up the production value here. And the new camera that I purchased, the Insta360 Link 2, there's a bug or a glitch. I'm in touch with customer support. They claimed that the person didn't know anything about that glitch. However, if you search YouTube, which I probably should have done a little bit more searching, I was just looking for a really great camera. And it's a really great camera, and the audio sounds great, except I'm struggling to keep the audio and video synced up. So I hope that this take is much better. So it's not, the previous video was good content, but it wasn't the quality that I want you guys to come to expect from this channel. So here's attempt number 2. If you've watched the other video, this is going to be more of the same. If you couldn't get through the missynced audio, I totally understand. I hate to redo this one, but I have to because it's just not right. So anyway, I previously put out a video on the elevated prices for the 50 series cards and how difficult it was to get 40 series cards if you were in the market, and if you had a 30 series card, is the 3080 Founders that I still had still a viable weapon, if you will? Is it still a viable card to use in day-to-day operations, in productivity, and some gaming? I found that for myself, I could just turn settings down and play the games I wanted to play. If you're really searching for high frame rates and the highest resolution, maybe this is not the solution for you. But ever since we've had this paper launch from NVIDIA, it's what what a zoo this has been. I didn't see this coming, and I guess I've been out of the game a little bit. As I've said, it's been a while since I've been building systems. I'm back to doing that now and excited about it, and I was really looking forward to this 50 series card. And now with the paper launch, there's no supply and long lines, and you got to be at the store, and you can't catch the online orders quick enough, and the scalpers and the bots and everything. This is a zoo, an absolute Charlie Foxtrot. The MSRP is a joke. The partner cards, their prices are elevated, and they need to make a profit too. Okay, I get it, but the amount that they're elevating their product over the MSRP, is it really a justified amount? Is that really worth it? I would say no, but there's some nice features in some of the cards, but I'm not sure it's worth the premium that you're paying over the MSRP number. The online retailers now are, because of demand, are selling bundles. Like the card's not available by itself, but here it is in a bundle, in a bucket of crap that you don't want, and a bunch of peripherals that they couldn't sell to begin with. And oh, by the way, here's how you can get it. I just sell me the card. I realize it's capitalism, and that's how certain places are doing it. That's really unfortunate, but it's not been without concern, because even if you wanted to pay those really high scalper prices, and we'll talk about the prices in a second, and if you could find yourself a card, there's now the still melting connectors, where they had that issue with the 40 series card on the high power connector, and they stuck with it, said that we fixed it. They didn't really fix it. They're pulling over 600 watts from this connector. They upped the TDP of the 50 series card from the 40 series card and thought, it'll be fine. There's uneven amp draw through the connector. So if your connector is not perfect, or if you've got a worn out cable or not making great contact, it will make up the amp draw from the other leads, and so it may pull uneven amps through your cable and heat that cable up, burn that connector out. Card catches fire. That's that's not good. There's images of blown power stages and capacitors. Uh, so the heat is the heat is definitely something. But if if you do your due diligence and you're taking those chances, now you might even get shipped with missing ROPs. So the card that you bought really wasn't the card that you bought. You didn't get what you paid for, and you're paying for it. That they're gaslighting you because these MSRP prices. Has anybody seen the Founders Edition for the 5070 Ti for $749? Because they're not making it. But then when people reach out to say, "Hey, where's your 749 MSRP card?" Well, as of now, as of today, NVIDIA is not making a Founders Edition, and it's only partner cards that are making it. And they're not following the MSRP prices. They're elevating the prices. So why put a MSRP price on a 5070 Ti when it's really not possible to get it for that price? Maybe I've just missed those opportunities. If I have, let me know. Um, I don't know that I would want one. I mean, the prices for the 5070 Ti is almost now what a 5080 MSRP would be, but they're even sometimes higher than that. And the 5080s are being priced well into almost 5090. 5090 prices astronomical. And that's if you're trying to not get scalped, and just buy a card that was from the MSRP of $1999 and is now $3,300 from a partner. I mean, it's a great card, but is it worth that? I mean, all of this is driving the prices of the 40 series even higher. So the 4090, I believe the MSRP was somewhere around 1800. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but now they're selling for well above. And just like I said in my previous video, these people that own these 4090s, and I honestly should, it was a mistake, total miscalculation on my part. I should have owned one already. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Why would I pay that much money for a 4090? Those prices seem really high to spend $1,700 for a graphics processing unit. Wow, to find it at that price today. I mean, these people are buying cards. Think about it. You're buying a card. What technology goes up in value in 2.5 years? You buy it brand new. You use it. It's not brand new in the box. You use it and then can turn around and sell your $1,700 card for $2,300 in February 2025. If you put a water block on it, some people are even getting higher values than that. I mean, I'm into water cooling and like the custom loop scene. That's a lot of fun. That's enjoyable to me, that type of hardware. So here I am trying to get a 4080 or 4090 on the cheap, which isn't happening. Because I thought since the 50 series was going to be released, then hey, it's perfect timing. The other cards are going to start coming down in value. You can pick one up, because right now I've got 30 series cards. I had a 40 series card. It was a lower end tier, but nobody's scalping a 4060. And I sold it for a loss, just to get some money out of it. And I have a 3080 Founders, a 3080 12 gig, and a 3090. And I thought, well, I'll be able to pick up some 40 series cards, a couple of those at 80 or 90, and start building on my GPU repertoire, and then look for an MSRP card, 5080, 5090, and see, can you get one at MSRP, or, God forbid, less? Like that's insane thinking, right? Less than MSRP. There's no way that's happening right now. I mean, but it's crazy times that we're living in. I mean, people are camping out front of micro centers and long lines every day and on the hunt for these things. Are we? We're out of control. I think we've totally lost our minds. But I don't know. Do you skip the 50 series altogether? I don't know. Maybe just maybe the point of this video is let's look at the 30 series again. I've got a 3080 Founders, 3080 12 gig, 3090. Let's look at these cards. The benchmarks aren't new. You can go back from 2020 and see the performance of these cards, but that's not the point of the video today. The point is, with today's software, today's productivity, are the 30 series cards still viable? If you have one of these cards, maybe you should pull back on the reins a little bit, relax, wait this out, let these prices come down, unless you just got to have that 240 hertz with your your amazing frames per second and your 4K video. I mean, if you're really wanting the cutting edge, this video is not for you. Go camp out, go stand in line, spend your money the way you want to spend your money. All I'm saying is maybe this can serve as a gut check time and say maybe we should just hang on a minute, reassess, and let's let NVIDIA get some product on the market and see what happens to the values of these cards, because I don't know. At this point, I don't think they're going to go higher. Boy, I miscalculated once. Maybe I'm wrong again. But my plan is to try to wait this out a little bit. Nonetheless, let's look at some productivity of some synthetic benchmarks, a couple games. This really isn't about gaming. There's a lot of good content creators out there that can talk to you about gameplay, experiences, and what is a good card for the game you want to play. That's not the point of this video. The point is, yes, you might be able to play some games, turn some settings down, but productivity, rendering, that type of utilization of the GPU, is it still worth it to just hang on to your 30 series? Let's check out some information and in a little bit more detail. Okay, so are we ready to throw out the 30 series? The only really reason I'm making this is let's not get in a hurry to pay these ridiculous prices. If you own a 40 series and you're trying to recoup all of your investment and make some money, good for you. Likely somebody will buy it. I wish you the very best. But I can't justify paying that type of money when I have a decent card, and I want to maybe convince you that the 30 series in some respect is still a decent card. And from a productivity standpoint, let me try to make the case. So I think let's stop and think this over before we chuck this out. So there's a few things I want to discuss today, one of 6 things, and I'm going to try not to make the video very long. I've debated maybe chopping this up in a bunch of different ones, but it's hard to summarize the pieces that you want to talk about when they're all in a bunch of little videos. So let's get right into this. So looking at GPU performance versus differences in the same PC. So one system, multiple GPUs, which is how most people test the GPU in today's market. And then looking at system performance when you're rendering 4K files. And I'm getting into DaVinci Resolve and hoping that that's treating me well. The rendering performance would matter, right? And so, but everyone always says, update your drivers. Do the drivers matter? And we'll take a quick peek here. Now, there's caveats to that because I'm trying to use the latest drivers with the 30 series. Does it matter? Probably not as much as maybe when you're getting into the 40 or 50 series, but let's wait and see here. And then how important are CPU and RAM when you're rendering and trying to work in video editing? And finally, should you pay these prices for 40 series and then the 50 series cards when you see this data? I guess that's really up for you to decide. But let's look here. So the configuration that we're working on is what I refer to as a penthouse system. And I've talked about these systems previously in other videos when I'm talking about CPU cooler efficiency and BIOS settings. If you haven't seen those videos, you can go back and check those out. Penthouse system is an i9-14900K, 32 gig of DDR5 memory with 6000 XMP profile. I think that's probably the most common. If you were going to build an Intel system at this stage in the game, I would likely think you would grab a 14900K. I could be wrong. The sim rig is a i9-14900KS with 64 gig of DDR5 memory. And the office rig, the main rig, is the i9-14900KS with 96 gig of DDR5 memory. It's also water-cooled memory. When we're looking at these systems, for example, if I'm going to look at the one system, which we're going to have the Penthouse machine, and I'm going to run all the GPUs in this machine. So that's the K with 32 gig of DDR5, and then the Founders Edition card with the Bits Power Water Block, the Zotac 3080 12 gig overclock with an EK Velocity Water Block. Okay, I know, EK, but that's how I bought it. I bought that one used. And then finally the Gigabyte Vision OC 3090, and I haven't put a water block on that one yet. We're going to do some testing of maybe let the cat out of the bag. Does it matter if you air cool the card versus if you just put a water block on it and try to keep it cool? Is that why I'm getting some pretty decent performance with my 3080s? We'll see. None of the GPUs are overclocked. These are just straight out of the box settings. Plug them in, see what you get. And the Gigabyte motherboards with these CPUs have the vidlock and the undervolt settings. If you're not familiar with my settings for that, please go back, watch some videos. This is going to be too long the way it is. And so if you're just looking at synthetic benches, and this is the 14900K, 32 gig of DDR5. The 3090 is the green, red is the 12 gig, and the Founders is the blue. For Cinebench, you see a pretty decent stepwise pattern, and that's pretty consistent. Interesting, the PC Mark X Express, because there's a lot of other factors that go into that, but I still don't know why I'm getting slower performance with the 3090. Also, you're looking at Orange Room. It really was not a huge difference here. When you're looking at the 3D Mark benchmarks, they're not huge differences. I kind of anticipated the 3080s being grouped like this, but then the 3090 being substantially marked improvement, and it really didn't point out that way. So when you're looking at the uplift from the Founders Edition, you're looking at 6 to 11%. So when you're doing the total average for synthetic benchmarks, so you get a 11% up performance from the Founders to the 3090. When you're looking at select games, and I only viewed these 3 games. These are free benchmarks, and the Resident Evil 6, Black Myth Wukong, and Monster Hunter Wilds. I chose a couple different resolutions to compare, trying to be a little consistent. When you're looking at the 3090, and there's not a huge difference in Resident Evil. There's not, honestly, a huge difference in Black Myth Wukong or Monster Hunter Wilds. That's probably the biggest difference that you see is in Monster Hunter Wilds. But when you're looking at the 12 gig to the 90, that's pretty tight. When I'm seeing these responses, is there something wrong with my 3090? Is this the kind of uplift that we're seeing here when they made that other? Because I'm calling it a 3080 12 gig. It's a Zotac card, but I bought this used with a water block on it. Took a chance, bought the water block, everything. It worked great. I thought I was getting a 10 gig card. It was advertised as that. When it showed up, it was 12.
So I assumed it was just a 3080 12 gig. Is this 3080 Ti numbers? Is that what I have? Is that why it looks that close to the other? But in some benchmarks, it's really close to the Founders Edition. Um, anyway, but you get a 3 to 4% uplift in gaming benchmarks. And if you look at the Blacksmith Wukon, you're not getting great FPS across the board. I'm not sure that that would be a very playable, fun experience of the lower resolution and the ultra settings at 42 frames per second. You would have to further reduce that. When you're looking at the rendering benchmarks, Blender, V-Ray, Octane, the benchmark compilation for Adobe Photoshop, Premiere, and DaVinci Resolve Studio, um, there's not a huge difference between these three cards. And I'm slightly disappointed that the 3090 is not doing better than oftentimes that 3080 12 gig. So they're still getting the job done, but I was expecting really the 3090 to be really running away with the show here, and all three of these cards are doing a decent job. So you've got a 2% uplift in the 12 gig card and a 2.8% by using 3090. Not a huge difference, but nonetheless, you still have productivity here. But when you're specifically working with DaVinci Resolve, what kind of performance can you achieve with a 30 series? Well, when you're looking at um, the benchmark scores, I've listed them for you here. And so the Penthouse are at the bottom three. That Office Rig, I ran the Founders Edition, which the Office Rig had the Founders Edition as its main card when I built it. And I just ran the tests and then plugged the 3090 in. And then the Sim Rig had the 3080 12 gig as its card and would plug the 3090 in it. So really that Penthouse machine with the K and 32 gig of memory had all three. But the fastest system in processing was the 3090 with the sim rig at 64 gig. It wasn't the office rig, which I don't understand. Maybe it was because I didn't disable a bunch of things that were running in the background, and there were some resources being tied up. I was trying to do these benchmarks as real world. Here's what's running on a computer, and this is how we would normally use it. You see, there's a 10% drop across the board, but 5% or so, but between the systems that from the 3090, so not horrible when you look at the real-time benchmark. So this was rendering a 4K file that was about 22 minutes long of one that I've uploaded to my channel. And I used it as the control and ran them all and say, well, how long did it take? And so there's the times of how long it took in a real world situation. And then let's group them from fastest to slowest. And so the Office rig with the KS, the 3090, and the 96 gig of memory was the fastest rendering time at 4 minutes, 17 seconds. And then you can see the second fastest was the SimRig 3080. It didn't even group the 3090s together as the fastest. Uh, I can't explain that. I figured all my 3090s would be run down the list and then my 3080 12s and 10, but it didn't work out that way. But what it showed was more likely that the KS CPUs also played a role. The top two were the KS machines, and then that Penthouse K with the 3080 12. it's stuck its nose in there and messing up the trend, but it still, I mean, these systems still do well. The slowest was 22 seconds longer, and that was the Penthouse K slower processor, the slowest GPU, and the lowest amount of RAM. So at least that was consistent. And the fastest was the fastest processor with the fastest GPU with the most memory. Everything else in the end is sort of a hodgepodge close together. But maybe the latest drivers matter. So if you're looking at just the office rig, and I was running an older set of drivers with the 3090, and then I was hesitant because on my test bench got completely messed up, and it was during that 3090 repair, and I put the latest drivers on, and everything was really glitchy. But I went ahead, I tried, and the newest drivers took here, and they're the ones that are supposed to be used for the 50 series card, and we're now using them for the 3090, right? And so look down your synthetic benchmarks, you can see what the uplift is. Now, the unique valley data way down here, something's got to be up with that because everything else was not that big of a change, 2% at best. So there was a difference. Maybe the 30 series can't take advantage of those drivers like a more advanced 40 or 50 series card. And so maybe that's why I don't see such a big uptick in performance, but roughly 3% if you factor in all the means. So I guess it still matters. Update your drivers, get the best performance you can get out of your hardware um, before moving on. If you're looking at the Office Rig Select Game comparison, you've got the three same here: the KS 96 gig of DDR5 memory, and what's the best that I can come up with between driver variances, the newer and the older drivers. You look at for 4K, like Black Myth Wukong, something was up down here. I can't explain this. This doesn't make sense to me. Everything else would be, 2-3% increase, real from either no change to 4 or 5%. That's what you could expect. This doesn't make sense. I didn't notice that was such an outlier. I should have rerun that one, or something was up there with the settings. But take that for what you will. Just being honest about it. So you're looking at maybe a 2 to 3% uptick of game performance by using the newer drivers. And then what about rendering? If you're going to, does rendering and productivity matter? When you're looking at your Resolve Studios, interestingly, we saw a drop in performance. No change with the CPU benchmark. Shocker. That's actually nice that really didn't change. But for the others, you did see an increase in performance. The V-Ray GPU here, that's quite alarming. That one's interesting. I don't know if there was something going on in the background that messed this read up or it truly benefited to that level, but that's kind of an outlier. You're looking at about 2%, I would imagine. But then GPU aside, does the processor and RAM matter? When you're looking at synthetic benchmarks, and now we've plugged in the 3090 to all of these systems, and the Office with the 96 gig is in green. So if the RAM capacity and everything's going to matter, the green bar should far exceed everything. And the next fastest system is the KS 64 gig, and that's in red. The slowest would be the K with the 32 gig, and that's in blue. but you don't see a huge difference. You do see a performance test 11 3D. You see there's a change here. I'm not sure exactly why the KS system with 64 gig, that's the sim rig. I'm not sure why the sim rig struggled with the 3D mark here. Um, Also a difference in the heaven performance, but there's also a huge uptick with the cyan room in terms of the 3090 just running away with it. That's really the only time that's happened. So that's not very consistent. So I would imagine you can see that there's not a huge difference across the board. And I'm kind of making a play here is that even for these 3090 prices, you may not even need that if you're just trying to get a card to get a system running, and if you've got a 3080, rest easy that you're not missing out by not having a higher 3090. And is that what this means? That's kind of what the data is showing a little bit. So um, when you're doing the select game benchmarks with the 3090 and the different systems, you see the founders of the penthouse machine is the 20,600, the sim rig is the 21,900, and the office rig is the 22,000. So there is an uptick in your benchmark scores based on the other hardware that you have. So pick and choose your pieces wisely. Like, don't spend all of your money on a 50 series GPU and then get garbage to go with it and say that's fine. I've got the best GPU. I'm happy, because you may not be. And then the rendering benchmarks is looking at the penthouse machine with the K 32 gig versus the sim rig KS 64 gig versus the office rig KS 96 gig. You see a consistent increase. And then the rendering benchmarks again, just to highlight these three numbers, from 427 to 426 are really not much of a difference. K and KS machines with the lower amount of memory. Apparently, RAM does factor in here, unless that 417 is a huge outlier. But I mean, it could be from everything else that we saw, but you'd like to believe that if you've got, the fastest 14th gen CPU and you've got 96 gig of memory, if that matters, and you've got the fastest 30 series card, what is this? Is this unrealistic? I think it's probably spot on. I really don't doubt that number. Um, it just helps you understand that the rest of the systems the rest of the system components also matter. But overall, I was a little underwhelmed by the 3090, and um, I'm not sure, is that because the other two 3080 cards were water cooled and my 3090 was OEM air cooler? Like, I actually did order a water block for this, and I realized we're a couple generations old now. Why are you water cooling a 30 series? But I'm trying to establish that it still would be beneficial to water cool the card, and although for the longevity of the card, if you're buying a 50 series or even a 40 series to try to protect your investment, if you're paying all of this money, and you'll still get better performance even if you don't overclock it. I really think I've shown that with keeping it cool of the CPUs, and I would imagine that it translates over to GPUs as well. It stays away from your thermal throttling and your. I didn't actually present any of the temperature data today. This took a lot of time to do, but I did collect some temperature data. That will be for another time. This video is long enough. So I think the 30 series cards still work, and unless I find a deal on a 40 series card, or I find an actual MSRP Founders, because DeBauer actually might be making a water block for the Founders series. And EK is saying they're coming out with one too, but with the quality that Thermal Grizzly makes, I would lean toward that. Just that's my personal opinion. Shout out to you, Roman. Um, happy to see the products that you've got releasing soon. But I think that I may snag something like that. I'd like to have more GPUs in my repertoire and to even add to this data. But I think the 30 series cards still work, and let the scalpers and the people that are trying to, recoup all of their funds. If you need a card that bad and you've got the money, please spend the money the way you feel like you need to spend it. But it just, to me, it doesn't make sense to spend that kind of money. And because I have a 30 series card and I've got renewed faith in the 3080s, because I really thought, I was excited when I had my 3090 and preparing to do all of these testing, and not that I'm not that excited about the results after seeing the 3090 not run away with it. But I do realize there was a bigger performance uplift once you got to the 40 series. So maybe when I finally get my hands on some of this stuff, I will continue to add to this data.
Well, there you have it. I don't know how you feel about that data. It's not, you're not setting any land speed records with these cards, but I think that you'll realize that it's reasonable to hold on to these cards, use them. Let's try to let the landscape reset a little bit. I think, in addition, AMD is releasing their 9070 information, and I couldn't be pulling for AMD any more than I am right now. We need competition in the market so desperately that NVIDIA is just basically saying, we make our money with AI. We don't really care about you gamers. What used to be their bread and butter is now a drop in the bucket, and we get what we get once they're done manufacturing all their other enterprise stuff. That's my impression of what they're doing. And we like to keep the demand high and the prices through the roof and trickle cards out into the market. So yeah, if you have one of these 50 series cards, the TI, the 80, the 90, hats off to you. I can't, even with trying to use this as a business expense and trying to grow a small business, I can't even justify those prices right now. Not with everything else that I'm pumping into it and everything else that's going on. These prices are absolutely insane. But with AMD releasing their 9070 card, uh, apparently soon, the details just dropped this week. Hopefully, the embargo on testing and independent testing happens next week, and the launch is soon. I am really pulling for AMD. If they can bring a card to the market, and supposedly it's $600 or less, I think the prices are still up in the air, and that's concerning. I would like to think that they've got their ducks in a row, but we're all hoping that they make the right decisions and that the benchmarks are what they are. So, with that being said, I really appreciate your time and attention today. I hope you found this video at least somewhat entertaining and helpful. If you've got a 3080 or more and you're finding the prices as ridiculous as me, let's just wait it out together. Let's see what AMD brings to the market and then see what happens with supply in a month or two. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. God bless.